All right, one down.
There you go. Anyway, here we are. Here we are for yet another conversation about things that are on our minds, as it were. And from episode 3, one of the things I really wanted to talk more about was your statement, our conversation. I was feeling pretty, I want, I was feeling a lack of hope for the future and
Oh,
not being very hopeful about our young people kind of taking over and stepping up to the plate where they needed to be. Now, that could be a result of the fact that I've been retired from spending time with young people for going on 18 or 19 years. When I was teaching, I had all the hope in the world for tomorrow and the young people because they were just I just loved them. They were
mm,
marvelous people, and I knew that they were good hearted inside and would work hard to do the right thing and so forth. But I've been out of that world for a while, so I don't, like you, have Zach and his friends and so forth. I don't have that young people's connection. However, this past week, watching Cassidy Hutchinson and the interviews. I don't know if you caught many of her interviews. You're so busy developing your radio shows and all that
in
kind of stuff.
parts, yeah,
But I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, she's what? She was 24 years old when she had to make
yeah.
some of these really difficult decisions. And I have to tell you, I was thinking back to when I was 24 and wondering if I would have had the courage and the determination um, to to do the right thing in the way that she did. I mean, when you listen to her story and how, especially when she talks about her father's response, saying that, throwing the subpoena in the trash and and refusing to help her financially find a lawyer that was not part of Trump world, and telling her that Trump was the greatest president ever lived. And I mean, now her parents were divorced, it's true, but she was in need of finances in order to break free from Trump world, and her father refused to help. I mean, that just crushed me,
Yeah, yeah.
hearing that. And just watching her and listening to her and so forth, wondering if I would have had the courage back at that time, particularly. Now, I had a different father than she, for sure, and I could tell you stories about that too. But would I have had the courage? I mean, I know back then, searching for meaning, my own personal search for meaning was pretty intense at that point. In fact, in Colorado, I taught a literature course called Man's Search for Meaning, and was taking graduate courses about educational philosophy and trying to find who I was as a person, in my studies and in my teaching. And there were a couple of experiences that I had back in the day, in addition to the literature I taught, because the literature I taught was all about people, and we'll talk about that more in a bit, but all about people having to make choices in a different sense than we were talking about in part one, but making a choice about how to behave, what to do, how to live. One of the things, when I was teaching in Colorado, we had a humanities class, and there were 6 of us teachers, and we would offer different sessions. One of us would offer films that would address a particular belief, or and another of us would address or talk about a piece of literature. Another one of us would talk about a religion or a series of religions. Another of us would talk about what was going on in our community. But we'd come at the theme of what do you believe from different angles, from art, from literature, from music, from philosophy, from religion, and so forth. And I can remember we did a panel discussion. And the panel, we invited all the kids from all 6 of our classes to a large room, and each of us teachers was to address the sentence starter. This is what I believe. And Ross, I knew I believed in being kind, and yet I also knew that being kind sometimes is naive. I had all these conflicting thoughts, and for the first time we did this particular part of our class, I didn't know quite what to say. Happily, and that really bothered me, because it's like, who am I? Who am I pretending to be? Who am I really? And so one of the things that happened to me subsequent to that first time was Paul and I managed an apartment house in Colorado. And so one day, one of the tenants came to the door to pay his rent. And, he was a shy kind of young fellow, and he made this statement, something about, I won't be here to pay next month's rent. And so I said, well, are you moving? Where are you going? And he said, no, I just won't be here. I just won't be here. And I could tell by his body language that he was coming from suicidal ideation.
Wow.
And so I said, hey, let's talk about this. And we spent the next couple of hours, we sat down on the steps and just talked about what was going on in his life and why he was feeling so bad. And, and Ross, I have to say that, I didn't want, just to tell him, hey, good night's sleep, you'll feel better tomorrow, or go take a run, and I'm sure that'll fix things, right?
Yeah,
But what I ended up doing, and that's another episode someday, statements that are known as toxic positivity statements. I'm known for them. But what I ended up doing that afternoon a little bit, and then the next day, was I went into my apartment and brought him books. I brought him Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye. I brought him Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. I brought him, oh God, I can't even remember anymore. I brought him Franny and Zoe, which was a Bible to me at that time, by J.D. Salinger also. And what I ended up doing, I realized, and it should be no surprise to anybody but me as a literature teacher, what I brought him were pieces of literature that addressed the things, the discouragement he was feeling and the hopelessness he was feeling, and tried to give him a hand to hold, to say, as Salinger has said in Holden Caulfield, and it's a quotation that I offered forever in my teaching. Holden Caulfield is disgusted with life, if you remember from Catcher in the Rye, disgusted with life, and he runs away to New York City, and he calls everybody a phony, and he's just disgusted with everything, because nothing is pure, nothing is beautiful, everything is a sham, everybody's a phony, and that's what he keeps saying throughout the novel. But he goes to his English teacher, of all people, okay, and his English teacher, has this quote that, like I said, I've used forever in my teaching, and it starts with, many, many men have been troubled morally and spiritually, just as you are right now. Happily, some of them wrote about their troubles, and we can learn from them if we want to. And it isn't education, it's history, it's poetry. And so as a literature teacher, teaching literature is practice in living. You get to live through a character's minds. You get to live through a character's feelings and expectations and disappointments anger and all those things by following the character. And then you, separate from the character as you're reading, can say, is that who I am? Is that who I want to be? Or do I want to be somebody different? And I love literature for that reason, because it helps us know who we are, who we want to be, and what we want our lives to be about. And I'm convinced if more people had read Animal Farm by George Orwell, and if
Yeah.
more people had read 1984 by George Orwell, no one, including my husband, would have voted for Donald Trump in the first place, because there it is.
Yeah.
So if I could, in our
Yeah.
discussion today, encourage people to read 1984 and Animal Farm before you vote
Yeah.
in the next election. So there you go. So
Or at least
anyway,
get
so I struggled with the question, and I know what a people pleaser I am, and people who know me know that. I hope if I'm ever in a situation that Cassidy Hutchinson was in any regard, that I will be the person I want to be. I've talked a lot. It's your turn.
That's okay. I haven't seen a lot of her testimony, but of course I've seen aspects of it that's made the news, and one of the things was when I don't know if some of my former colleagues tried to discredit her directly or if others tried to use staffers as there's an entire podcast, the entire theme of the podcast. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I've
No.
talked about it in other circles. A guy named Miles Taylor was the guy who, talking about coming out,
Mm-hmm.
was known as Anonymous back in 2018. He was the guy who wrote the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, just trashing the Trump administration. And this is only a year into it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said in the op-ed that, I'm high up in the administration, this, that, and the other thing. I know what I'm talking about. And the Trump administration just targeted him, having no idea who it was. There was this investigation by, high up, chiefs of staff and whoever, and that investigation and these accusations and this person losing their job because they know it's him. And then another op-ed comes out saying,
Mm-hmm.
nope, you missed me.
Yeah.
Uh, and finally he came out because he said staying hidden is exactly what Trump would do. He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have the courage to step up and say, I don't belong here. And one of the things that somebody tried to do was to discredit Cassidy when she talked about the events of January 6th, where Trump was told, you're going back to the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And he reached up into the front seat to grab the steering wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody showed a photo of the Cadillac, that what we call the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
If our viewers just Google Cadillac and the Beast, it will be the presidential limo. I promise you. And you'll see, like any stretch limo, how far back the back door is from the front door, meaning that's also where the back seat is, where the president sits. And they showed this picture of the Beast saying, how could he have reached up into the front seat? He's all the way back there.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the car. And the point is, this was the car from that day.
Mm-hmm.
That picture was debunked. It was
Really?
taken in Reno, Nevada. He wasn't in the Cadillac. He was in the Chevy Suburban, which is just like any other Chevy Suburban as far as layout,
Right. Right.
except it's a tank.
Yeah.
It's a it, it's a
Yep. Yep.
it's a tank, um, and that says that he could have reached up into the front seat, and that her testimony is in fact accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Because now whoever it was that tried to discredit her has already discredited themselves, because the photo that they said was the photo from that day was not from Washington, D.C. It was Reno, Nevada.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, I mean, Miles, his podcast called The Whistleblowers, every episode is about Cassidy Hutchinson's from all over the Trump administration. And that's the saying, the quote that I use: you no longer have to be able to spell Google to be able to use it. If you remember back in the day, all of 15, 20 years of what they just celebrate 25 years, I think it was.
Something like that. It's incredible.
Google, you had to go to your web browser and type in google.com.
Mhm.
Well, if you never heard of Google before and you didn't know how to spell it, you weren't going to google.com.
Right.
So you couldn't do the search.
Mhm.
Now you just type your question into the web browser
Mhm.
and ask yourself how many of the witnesses against Donald Trump are from the Democratic Party, and get ready for a big zero.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's your witch hunt,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
But yeah, Cassidy is reminds me of another family member who
Who?
was very young. Um, she's this young lady's in the intelligence community, so is only limited. Was in right out of college and has like me even more so has seen and witnessed history. Um, uh, like she took my she's my sister in law, and took my brother to the White House Christmas party. Got him a chance to meet W. When she and her boss, the higher up person in the intelligence community, were approached to come back to the National Security Council and to be reassigned to the White House, they both flat out said no, not doing it.
Hmm.
And and my brother, both my brothers and their wives are very conservative people. He, for the reason of the Second Amendment argument, did vote for Trump and still thinks that Biden, and even as they're talking about it now, still thinks it's actually true that Biden and Harris are going to come for his guns. Never happen. And this is the mentality. And what Cassidy's going up against
Mhm.
was the persecution from within her own political party,
Mhm.
from within her own place of work,
Mhm. What I was impressed
in
with in her
society.
testimony, I mean, I was impressed with a lot relative to her testimony, but mostly her character that allowed her to do what she was doing. But in addition to that, she was definitive about the danger of this particular individual going forward. She
Oh
made
yeah, they all
no
are.
bones.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And, she tried to encourage the people she had worked with who could make a difference here in disallowing, a second term. Tried to give them a reason, saying over and over again, once you get through it, it's okay on the other side, to say, I'm not supporting this person anymore. It's hard, but you'll be okay. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of support on the other side. Don't you worry about it. It's not too late to do the right thing. And I loved that. I
Yeah.
love that because I
Yeah.
really do think that a lot of people are really too afraid or
Have you heard?
too.
Yeah. Have you heard Mitt Romney since he left, or since he's announced that he's not going to run for
Not
reelection?
much. Not much. Tell me.
Some parts of his book are not an authorized autobiography written by somebody else. Parts of that book, when I say his book, the book about him, are now coming out, and he's said of I don't know, unwavering or an abnormally high than what you might think, higher than what you might think, number of fellow Republican senators who came to him in confidence saying that they wanted to vote yes to convict as well, but could not do it for fear of their family's safety.
Right. Oh, that's no surprise to me. Yep.
And he's
Yep.
like, what would the founding fathers who have lost their lives
Right.
say to you right now?
Yep. 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 Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, my
Yep.
own quick story, similar.
Oh, good.
I,
Tell it.
I was the site agent for his last, and what hopefully will historically be his last inaugural ball. Um, when there's a presidential site, there's somebody from the detail that is the site agent, um, and that's who is in charge of the entire thing. But for something like what's called an NSSE, stands for National Special Security Event, like the Super Bowl, like the UN meetings in New York, or like the entire weekend that encompasses the inauguration, the Secret Service is in charge of it, not the president's detail. And being the agent from the Washington field office, I was that agent representing the entire Secret Service, because in that we're protecting everybody at the event, not just the president and vice president and our other human protectees. So I had a higher up role than what I normally would have had for that reason. So I was more directly dealing with his staff.
Mhm.
And I don't remember what it was, but some taste of what we were getting into as a country came about. And I called out the staffer, whose phone number I actually still have. I found that the other week. And he said, if you think that's crazy, wait till you see us in our second and third term.
Mhm.
They knew from literally day one
Mhm.
that this guy was going to be, you
Forever.
know, yeah, yeah,
Yep.
you know, and that's, I just saw this somewhere too with regards to that and and Biden's age and ability. You can vote for an 82-year-old man now in 2024 and a younger protege in 2028, or you can vote for Donald Trump in 2024 and never vote again.
Mhm.
And there's the denial. Oh, that's
Mhm.
not going to happen. I already told you it's going to happen.
Mhm.
From what are we coming up on now? 7 years ago?
Mhm.
And look back at history. Hitler said the same thing.
Mhm.
Putin said the same thing.
Mhm.
Russia is technically not a communist government. It ain't a democracy.
Mhm.
I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, it's. I have, and I knew that, you know, our saying is worthy of trust and confidence. Does that apply to everybody? I don't think so.
No.
If it did, we wouldn't have lost the text messages from that day.
Right.
Come on, I mean, you had
Right.
no problem finding text messages and other shit when you wanted to nail me to the cross for being gay.
Yep. Is that what happened to you?
They found a photo that got released somehow of me and a now ex boyfriend in the bedroom.
Mhm.
Um, they and I said I'm not, and they tried to do the whole gay thing. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I know where that is. So I don't know how you got it, but congratulations. If you want to use it, go ahead, because you're not going to shame me into doing anything.
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, well, we don't think so either. But what's it doing here?
Mhm.
What are we talking about this for?
Mhm.
And that it was from an incident at the inauguration. Um, I tell this story in season one of Up the Middle. A friend of mine came down from Pennsylvania and stayed with me in my hotel room, which is permitted. I know the guy. I can call him right now too. And I was working days. He and some others were, obviously everybody, the other half of everybody in DC was working nights. But our day shifts were slightly longer. to, give a little extra time to the night shift. And so that meant a longer period of time where I was out of the hotel room and he was on his own. And so he uses Grinder and goes and hooks up with some guy who was on the night shift and home alone in their hotel room. And now he's amazed at the fact that ultimately he hooked up with two Secret Service agents. And he's taking his camera and he's going like this, doing a selfie with a panoramic of the room behind him. And hanging is all this Secret Service, badge, gun, paperwork, all kinds of shit that he should not have been left alone with in the hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
And this made it to, I don't know if it was TikTok or one of the social media platforms. And of course, we have people at headquarters that search for shit like that,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's their official duty or if they're just, trying to ruffle feathers. And of course, as soon as it was seen, everybody said it was me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get back to, actually, no, I get a call from a friend of mine, another gay agent, without saying, we haven't talked in a little while, and without saying hello, without wanting to catch up, without giving me some sort of heads up. He just goes, "Was it you?" And I had no idea what he was talking about yet.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells me, and I go, he sends me the video, and I just start laughing for two reasons. One, obviously, I knew the guy in the video. That's my friend. And it wasn't my hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
I could see by, the hotel room. It wasn't my hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm fine. But they brought this, I didn't share that with anybody. I just, let everybody think it was me. So I get home, I get a call from the boss. And when I say the boss, I mean the actual special agent in charge of the office. There's only two reasons you get a call from that person. It's either really good or really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I already knew why. So he said, inspections is going to come talk to you. That's like our internal affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to talk to you. You need to talk to them. And they tried to make it first about my credit, which they already knew about, and they admitted that they already knew about. We have to maintain decent or acceptable credit to keep us away from being a target of bribery.
Right.
Anybody with a security clearance has to have that.
Okay.
And my credit was actually not good at the time because of a pissing match that I got in with my mortgage company, who at the time of the initiation of this incident was led by a guy named Stephen Mnuchin, who later
Aha.
became known as the foreclosure king and also became known as Donald Trump's Treasury Secretary.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So long story short, they're bringing up all these issues with my so-called background, which is being renewed. Every 5 years, you have to go through a renewal. And they were about 2 years behind, and they finally got to me. And they said about a bunch of financial things. If it wasn't rectified, we don't know if we can renew your security clearance, which means 6 months away from being eligible to be fired, or excuse me, before of being eligible to retire, I could be fired.
Wow.
And so it was either, and I just, when this meeting took place, I just got back from a trip here where I looked at another house, not as, ideal as this one. So, things do happen for a reason. But that house, I was able to pay for in cash, outright, own, 100%.
Wow.
And I put an offer on it, and it had been accepted. So I take that offer, I continue with that offer, and risk losing my job. And if that happens, now I can live in the house, but I can't do anything else anyway because I have no income.
Mm-hmm.
Or I use the money that I would have used to put down on the house
To rectify
to
your credit. Yep.
to fix all the credit shit. So now I found this one. I'm on the water. I've got two jet skis. I own 40% of the house already.
Very good.
Is what
Very
it
good.
is. But
Very
yeah,
good.
I know what it's like to have your friends come after you.
Yep.
And that's what happened to Cassidy. That's what happened to Miles. That's what happened to a lot of people who did their job. Mark Milley, just recently,
Oh
General
my
Milley.
gosh. Yeah.
I
Yep.
was
Yep. Yep.
so I was so good. Not to turn this back on me, but when I left, I wrote everybody, as every agent does. You send an email to everybody you ever worked with that you want to reach out to one last time. I had been working a lot of midnight shifts that summer, and something that a senior agent probably shouldn't have been assigned to unless requested. Like some will request that so they're home to get their kids off to school or something. I had no concern for that, and so I knew it was some sort of like punishment.
Mm.
I had been told, yeah, we needed you, but you're going to go back on days, right back to night shift. So when I warned everybody, when I leave, don't expect to hear from me. And there's people that I've stayed in touch with because they weren't included in that. But my email had a picture of Johnny Carson from the last episode of
Mm-hmm.
his
Mm-hmm.
Tonight Show. And I just said, and after a long list of thank yous and funny stories and what have you, I just said, I bid you a heartfelt good night.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last time I've contacted anybody on any sort of official capacity
Mm-hmm.
to the Secret Service. And other people have reached out, to get plaques and things like that I delivered. Um, but friends have reached out, and we talk about retirement and when are you leaving, when are you pulling the plug, as we say. And come to this side, it's so much better, and I'm being paid almost take home $60,000 a year to not go to work.
Yeah.
I'll find
Very
another
nice.
job if I need to.
Yeah.
And I'm that's why when we talked in the last episode about PTSD, and I promise you, Cassidy's got it, Miles has it, General Milley, good God,
Yep.
you can only think of the stories that he could tell. Probably lived every Hunt for Red October, and the author that wrote all those books probably lived every one of those stories.
Right.
Um,
Well,
you know,
maybe in our next episode,
yeah,
we
we're
can
there already.
explore that. We are at the end already again of this episode, but it's been wonderful. I'm Jane Stahl.
And I'm Yergz. Kudos to Cassidy and everybody. Where can we find you, Jane? I think we left that out of Tuesday's episode.
Well, you can find me on the Be Inspired podcast through a variety of platforms, including Spotify and Apple and Google and Castbox and a, a variety, your favorite podcast platform. And of course, I also am co-editor for the Boyertown Area Expression. And you can find that by typing in Google the Boyertown Area Expression. I'm sure you'll find it that way. And on Facebook, of course. So how about you?
Same. This podcast, my own podcast, Up the Middle, political, nonpartisan. We try to take it up the middle and a little bit from each side. Also, 5 days a week at 5:30, live radio show on Yergz Radio. And I think that's pretty much all of them. If you want to need any help finding Jane or help finding me, you can find us both on Yergz Radio 7 days a week, where our podcasts are replayed. And you can get the links to that and even Boyertown Expression
All right.
on Yergz.com.
Very good. Well,
Uh,
then, until next time. And I want to talk about some of the people running for president on the
oh, yeah.
Republican side.
Remember
What do you
that list
think?
we started Tuesday? We should actually look at that eventually.
We should. All right, buddy. Take
All right.
care.
Yep.
Have a
See you,
good
everybody.
week. All right.
And we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. And please feel free to give us some feedback about what you want us to talk about from either one side or the other or both.
Definitely both.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.